Hey everybody, welcome to week 7. I'm starting off this video a little sad because my nice microphone I think died. I got it. I stole it from an old job and the place went out of business. And it was a pretty nice one. I mean this one was like $300. Obviously I got it for free, but I think something happened inside and it sounds like trash now. So you'll have to deal with the webcam mic for now. Anyway. Week 7, we are talking about animation today in Blender. So the first few weeks we've been talking about modeling, covering the basics using Blender, and now this is kind of a big gear change to animation. So we will talk a little bit about, assignment 4, which you can begin working on this week, which is related to animation. We'll also kind of look ahead a little bit to assignment 5, which is one of your bigger ones. So assignment 4 is 10 points like the others, but then assignment 5 is worth 20 points, so that's like a double one. So we'll kind of intro animation this week in this week's lecture. Next week we will talk about rendering. Rendering animations, but also just like rendering in general, talking about computer hardware and how rendering actually works and kind of what things are important when rendering. And then a couple weeks after that, so assignment 6 is also an animation assignment. So we'll come back to animating a little bit later. So today we're covering just like how to animate basic things in Blender. And then later on, we're going to actually look at character animation, rigging characters, and things like that. So animation is happening. Okay. Let us go over to Blender. General. Setting a new general file. Follow along, please. We are here in the layout workspace. There is an animation workspace that maybe we'll look at today, but it probably makes more sense to look at it a little bit further down the line. But for here, we can start with in our layout view. So in our workspace here, down at the bottom, you've probably noticed it, but we have a timeline. It starts at the number 0 and goes up to the number 250. So those of you that have done video editing before, this should make sense to you. This blue thing here is a playhead, and these numbers represent frames. So this current like animation here, which contains nothing, but it's 250 frames long. You can see there's a couple more controls here. So this is like a play forward button, pause, play backwards, pause. Spacebar is also the keyboard shortcut to play. Here is signaling which, underneath my head, we are currently on frame 73. So you can type in a number here. I want to be on frame 100. 10, I guess, is what I typed, 100, hit enter. Here you can also change the starting and end. So if I want my animation to be 900 frames, I can type the number 900 in here. And now you can see that this bar has gotten a lot shorter, so I might need to stretch this bar out to see all 900 frames. As I drag this out, you can see that now my workspace, or my timeline here, goes from 0 frames to 900 frames. Animation involves adding keyframes. So hopefully, I'm assuming that if you're in this class, you have done some amount of animating before. I believe a prereq for this class is Concepts of Interactive Media class, which involves animating. So I'm assuming a little bit of animation experience here. It's very similar. We're adding keyframes. So looking at our default cube here, we have our location X, Y, and Z. So we've got, you see these little locks here along the right of these transform properties. Next to that, there's these little white dots. And this is one of several ways to add a keyframe. So you actually see if I hover over this dot here, location X, it says animate property. So if I click that, several things have happened. The first thing is I have added a keyframe. That is signaled by the value turning yellow here along the X. There is a diamond here where that dot was, and you may not notice it, but down here on our timeline, and actually I can drag this up just to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit more noticeable. There's a little yellow diamond here. Cool. So I have keyframed the X location at frame 0. So if I were to move forward in time, say to frame 300, actually, you know what, I'm going to change this back to like 100 frames just for the sake of demonstration so that these animations don't take too long. So I've set my end value to 100. I've dragged this bar down to kind of zoom in on my timeline here. Let's go to like frame 30. I am now able to change the X value. So I could go GX. No, that was not G. GX. G. Oh, I was doing S. X, move it over here. Now, I have moved the box, but I have not added a keyframe. So if I were to press the play button now and watch the animation, choop, it would snap back to the center because even though I moved it, I did not add a keyframe. So you need 2 keyframes to animate. You need at least 2 keyframes to animate something. So if I go back to frame 30 and I go GX, move this over here, click, I can hit my little button over here, again, my keyframe button here, animate property, tink. And now you can see I have another orange keyframe on my timeline. And now it will animate between the 2 points. Go from 0 to 30, animating from left to right. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of like user interface things that we need to know. One thing to note is I should probably start at frame 0 instead of frame 1. That's good practice. Zoom. So let's look. When my playhead, or CTI, current time indicator is maybe what some people call it. When my current time indicator is above a frame, the value that is animated over here is yellow, and the diamond is filled in. The keyframe signal is filled in. If I move off one of the keyframes, say to frame 15, the diamond is open, and the value is green. So yellow means you're on a keyframe. Green means it's animating, but you're not on a keyframe. You maybe noticed another color. If I were to move this again, if I were to go G like this, you can see that it changed to orange. And that signals that you've changed, you've made a change, but it's not part of the animation. So here I'm on frame 39, I moved it, I didn't add a keyframe. If I play, choop, it's going to keep just moving in the X direction. Now, something interesting did happen though, however. I had only keyframed the X. I was only animating the X. So when I changed the Y and the Z, it did allow me to change that. So it is still animating. It's still sliding along the X for 30 frames, but it has now moved in the Y and the Z. So I can even do this again. Like I can go GZ, move it way up like this, and that'll keep, and it'll still just animate in the same direction. That's because the only value I had keyframed was the X. Okay, let's start over. Delete this. Shift A. I'm adding a new cube. So that's one way to add keyframes. The other way is using the I key. So I'm assuming everybody has the letter I on their keyboard. So let's all hit it together. I. I stands for insert keyframe. Whoops, I'm gonna move my mouse. I for insert keyframe. You have several options. Location, rotation, scale. Combinations of those things. Location and rotation. Location, rotation, scale. Blah, 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 blah. Lots of these. So you'll see here, right now I'm on frame 68 here. If I hit location here, insert keyframe location, you can see that all three of my location properties have been animated here, or have been keyframed, not animated. So if I move back in time to like frame 20, for example, you can see that all these values turn green. I've got open diamonds. I can hit the G key, move it up here. All three of them change orange. Click. But I still have to apply the keyframes, because if I just hit play now, that change went away because I only have one keyframe. I need two keyframes. So let me try it again. G. I could click these again and go ding, ding, ding. Add keyframes like that. That's one way to do it. Or the other way is to go back to your I menu. I for insert keyframes. I can hit location again to do all three. I'm going to Control Z because there's a new option now. If I do I, there's also available. And what this will do is it will keyframe anything that is being animated. So I can do available, and it'll do all three again. But that's not a great example. So let me go back to frame 68. Let me also just keyframe the Y rotation. Go back to frame 48. I'll G here. And then also, why don't I RY like this? Change that. So I'm animating the X location, Y location, Z location, and Y rotation. And if I do I available, it's going to do all of those because they're all being animated. So now if I play this, it goes into its spot. Cool. Zip. Nice. One other thing about adding keyframes, there's this button here, and this is called auto keying. And sometimes this is really helpful, and sometimes this is really painful. So be aware of its existence, but I would say for now, get comfortable just adding keyframes manually every time. But if you turn this on, auto keying, anytime anything changes, it's going to add a keyframe. So I'm on frame 1 right now. There are no keyframes. If I move this cube, if I hit the G key and move it here and click, it has applied transformation keyframes on everything. You can see that they all turned yellow, and they have a million keyframes right here. So now if I move forward in time to like frame 30 and move it again and like rotate it like this and scale it like this, it has done all of that. So the auto keying is on now. So anytime I move to a new frame and change any of these transform values, it's going to add a keyframe automatically, no matter what. Even if I don't signal add a keyframe. Here too. So like if you're trying to do things fast, the auto keying can be helpful. But it also can be dangerous because like you may be like adjusting some values over here and you realize that you changed something and all of a sudden there's a new keyframe that you didn't know where it came from. So that's just something to be aware of. The auto keying exists and we'll probably use it when we animate characters. But it's user beware for sure if you leave it on. So that's auto keying right here. You can see there's actually a couple different options: add and replace, or just replace. But anyway, that's there. So the cool thing about animating in Blender and kind of visualizing all of these things over here being able to be keyed is that almost anything can be animated, can be keyed. So here's a fun example. I'm going to go to my material preview. I'm going to hit the Z key and go to material preview. And I'm going to put a material on here. So with my cube selected, I'm going to go to my Material Properties tab here, add a new material, and I'm going to set the base color to pink. Cool. Now, what I can do is, why don't I go back here to frame 0, see all these little dots along the side here, anything with a little dot next to it can be animated. So you can see I hover it, I say animate property. So I'm going to put a keyframe with base color pink. I'm going to move forward in time here, maybe to the end of this animation, frame 68. And I'll just change the value. Make it orange. So in this particular instance, if you do I and do available, those only do it for transform properties, location, rotation, and scale. So here I will have to just tick the keyframe box, or the keyframe icon here. And so now, if we go back to frame 0, I believe if I do the home key, no. This button here will take you back to the beginning as well. If I hit spacebar and play, zoop, changes to an orange box. So it's pink, changes to orange, rotates. All this stuff too, like we can make it metallic. Oh, whatever. You can do it. Anything can be keyframed. So let's, okay, the next thing I'll show you. So here, along the bottom, this timeline is just showing us like basic keyframes. This is called, this is just like the timeline editor down here. But there's this little clock icon down here. And if you twirl this open, you can see that there are a handful of different animation timelines, or like workspaces that you can use. So one thing I want you to do here is, there's this little tiny arrow right off the edge here that might be hard to spot, but it's kind of underneath this clock. And it's just like a little right facing arrow. Click on that, and it opens up just like a little bit, it opens up a panel here that can be a little bit more useful. Let me move my camera up a little bit, make a little bit more room. So twirl open summary. And now you can actually see the different things that are being keyframed. So twirl some of these open so we can see that the X location is animating here and here. These are the X location keyframes. The Y location keyframes are here and here. Z, same with Y Euler, which is rotation. We can also see that in material 1, we have the red, green, and blue values changing. So one thing to be aware of what this means is, if there's a line straight across like this, that means the value isn't changing, like it's constant. Whereas if there's empty space between them, it means that it's changing. That's kind of a weird little thing that this is kind of like what a dope sheet is. If something remains, it holds across. Anyway, let's look at our different animation workspaces here though. So we're looking at the timeline editor. The dope sheet is fairly similar. If you click that, it really pretty much looks the same. Has a lot of the same things. But the other thing that I want to show you is the graph editor. Whoops. Animation graph editor. Now, I am somebody who uses After Effects a lot. In fact, I primarily work in After Effects with my job. So I'm somebody who looks at the graph editor quite a bit, because I want to have much more precise control over my animation. So if I play this right now, actually let me move my stupid face out of the way. Just even be up here. All right, if I play this animation right now, I'm going to frame 0, I'm hitting the spacebar on my keyboard, spacebar on my keyboard. You can see that, or hopefully you can notice that it sort of speeds up a little bit and then slows down as it comes to a stop. So it starts at 0, speeds up a little bit, slows down. This is called easing. Again, hopefully this is not news to you. But in Blender, by default, it's going to ease your animations. So like looking at, so let me twirl this open. Let's look at the X location here. And you're going to have to think back to your math class a little bit. So this is the X value that is being charted on a graph here. So the X value is, you know, at like, what is this? 7, 8. And then it slowly goes down, and then it's reaching 0. So you can see that when the slope of this line is steeper, that means it's moving faster. So we can click on different ones here. What is this blue one? The blue one is the Z. So same thing. The Z is not changing as much, but you can see that, you know, again, it's easing. I'm gonna delete this and just show you a more clear example. So I'm gonna Shift A, add a cube in here. We're just gonna animate the Z, or sorry, the X. I'm gonna go back to my object properties here. I'm gonna keyframe the X. I'm actually going to move this back to frame 0. Actually, I'm going to just undo. It's easier if I go to frame 0 here like this. Add a keyframe at X. I'm going to go to frame 30. Change the X value to 2. Keyframe there. Actually, no. It needs to be more drastic. We need this to be like 10. Okay. Keyframe. Okay. So, playing this. Also, I want to change my my number of frames to be not 90, but I want it to be like 50. So actually, here's how you change another way to change the total number of frames in your animation. Go to your scene properties. No, where is it? Here it is. This one, the little printer, output properties. Frame start, frame end is your frame range. I just want this to be 50 frames right here. Okay. So playing this. The box gets up to speed and then slows down and stops. As represented by this curve here. It's getting up to speed, getting up to 10, and then slowly going down to 10. Now, if I select one of these points here, you can see that there's these little handles that come off of it like this. And this is obviously changing my animation curve. So like if I kind of crank this like this, hopefully you can visualize before I press play the effect it's going to have. This is going to slowly start off, and then it's going to snap into place at frame 30. Let's play. Yep. Zoop. Cool. So if I flip it like this, you can see it's going to go past 10 and then come back and snap a little bit. Whoa. Whip. Now, if you wanted to not ease at all, we can change that as well. So actually to change what kind of handles are on here, if you have a keyframe selected, you can hit the V key. And you can pick what kind of handles you want here. So vector, maybe. We'll just make it like a right angle. We can do the same thing here. I'll select this one at frame 0, go V for vector. And now it's just a straight line. So now there's no easy at all. Zzz. So it's a constant speed all the way through because the line is perfectly straight. So you might have to, if you took calculus in high school, this might make sense a little bit to you. But again, you can always change things. So if you select it V aligned, I think that'll make, yeah, the handles work together like this. Let's see. So like if I wanted to have 3 points here, maybe I will also just GX move it here like this, and then go I for insert keyframe, do available, and added a Z one. Oh, or a next one. So you can see that my graph has gone off the chart here, so I may need to just Let's change the scale of this window a little bit. So what's it doing here? It's kind of stopping, going back a little bit. Whoa, whoa. Maybe I just want this to be like a little bit more rounded here. Yeah. So the graph editor will give you a lot of control over your different kinds of animations. Now let's walk through kind of a practical example a little bit. So do this with me. Follow along. I'm going to delete the cube. And let's go back to our, whatever one feels right for you right now. We can go back to timeline if you want. Timeline is easy to work with off the bat. Let's make this 300. Oh, here's the other thing. Frames. What is a frame even? So go back up here to your output properties. This little one that looks like a printer that's printing out a piece of paper. If you're a video student, this should hopefully make some sense to you. The frame rate right here. 24 frames per second is what it's set to. I like 30 frames per second. And so if your project, 2398 and 24 are considered to be the cinematic frame rate. It's a little bit slower of a frame rate, so things aren't quite as crisp. 60 frames per second, is a higher frame rate. That's like video games and stuff like that. 30 frames per second is more of a standard video format, I'd say. The reason it's 2997 and 2398 has to do with old tube televisions. That the electrical signal would get interference if the frame rate was at exactly 30 frames per second or 25 or 24 frames per second, so they'd have to cut out the frequency so they would offset a little bit. It's a weird electrical engineering thing. Anyway, let's animate a ball bouncing together. Please follow along. Shift A. Let's add a UV sphere. And let's right click and shade smooth so it's pleasing to the eye. Let's also add Shift A, add a plane behind my head. Let's name these. The sphere is ball. The plane will be our floor. With the floor selected, let's S and scale this up just a little bit. All right, let's get into an orthographic view, if you would please. 1 or 3, front or side. Again, you can do view, viewpoint, front, back, right, left, whatever. And let's GZ move this so that it's actually, you know what? Move it up. Move it as high as you want. Because we're gonna drop this from a height GZ. I don't think I finished my thought up on frame rate. So if we're doing 30 frames per second and I set this to 300, this is 10 seconds. A little quick math hopefully makes sense that this is a 10-second animation. Usually when you play in your scene here, it'll play in real time. But if there's a lot going on, it may slow down a little bit, so you just have to get a little bit of a sense of how long things are taking. So our ball is here up in the air. Our plane is here exactly level on the ground. So I am going to keyframe the Z position. So choose how you want to do this. I will do, I'm just going to keyframe by adding here. You can do I insert and actually do location if you want. But for now, I'm just going to do it like this. And you kind of have to just block, when you're animating things, you just need to block out the steps, and then you can adjust the timing as you go. So I'm going to go to frame 10. And I'm going to go GZ. I'm going to just have it hit the ground right there. You know, pretty close. Whoops. You can get precise if you want to. GZ. So here's the ground. Now, don't forget, anytime I want to add a keyframe, or anytime you want the value to change, you need to add a keyframe. So I'm just going to hit keyframe here like this. So looking back, I got to kind of remember where it was. So I was at 11. So let's go another 10 frames. And let's put this at, I don't know, 6. And add a keyframe. Excuse me. So we're boing, we're bouncing like this. Boing. So every time I'm going to go another 10 frames, and I'm just going to make this 1 because I know that that's exactly on the line there. Add another keyframe, going 10 more frames. We're at 6 before, I'll make this 3.5, adding a keyframe. So you can see it's adding a yellow keyframe every 10 frames, every time I'm doing it. Let's do this again, 1. Whoops. Oh, and I've moved the playhead without adding a keyframe, so it undid what I did. So I'll make this 1 again, add a keyframe. Then I can move the playhead. Make this 1.6, and then 0 here. So actually, you know, why don't I make this, instead of 300, I'll make it 100 frames long. There we go. So let's see how this feels. So I'm going to press play. Oops, and I forgot to have it hit the ground again. 1. So I'm at frame 70, adding a keyframe. So I've added keyframes every 10 frames until it eventually rests. Now, if this were real, you know, the ball would probably keep bouncing a little bit as we went. But as I play this, hopefully something is jumping out at you. Why does this look bad? It's because of the easing. So a lot of times when you're animating, it's helpful to like look at some reference videos or to like actually practice it yourself. Like if you have a ball, drop a ball. What does it look like when it bounces? And the big problem here is when balls don't slow down when they get to the ground. They get faster when they hit the ground and they bounce up in an instant. So the automatic easing here in Blender is causing us an issue. So let's look at the graph editor. Oh gosh, you guys, I love the graph editor. Hit the little clock down here. Let's change this to the graph editor. Okay. What's going on? There's a button here that's called normalize. And what this does is if there's lots of things animating that you all want to look at together on your graph editor, this will kind of chart them all on the same thing. That's what that does. But I'm just going to change the scale a little bit here so I can see all my keyframes. Except I can't quite see all of them. So navigating in the graph editor also kind of works as the same as your workspace. So if I hold down Shift and middle mouse button, I can kind of move around in here. Rolling the middle mouse wheel zooms in and out. So looking at our graph editor here, hopefully it's pretty plain to see that we're cool with the easing at the top, but we're not cool with the easing at the bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit this, go V, and change this to vector. V, vector, V, vector, V, vector. And let's just kind of see what this looks like now. Whoops. Back in my orthograph view, just want to see it. Ah. Yes. Not bad. So if you want your ball to be a little springier, you can change these handles. So like you can make it even bouncier like this. Kind of, oh, I accidentally selected all of them. Undo. I just want this keyframe. Bring this one up. So this is knowing how to manipulate your graph editor is definitely a skill that comes with practice, and like understanding what things to change to make it look better comes with time, comes with practice. So this definitely has a little bit more characteristic. You can see it. Ting! It's like a little bit more cartoonish. There is a thing that you should be aware of. 12 principles of animation. The 12 basic principles of animation. Whoops, I'm clicking on the wrong screen. This is, sorry, I apologize for the white screen here. But this is something that Disney came up with like in the 1930s. But there are several things that kind of help make animations look more lively or look better, I guess you could say. Squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action, pose, blah 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 blah. There's things in here about computer animation as well. Slow in, slow out, so that's easing. Arc, secondary action, blah 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 blah. But like these are all things that you should at least be aware of their existence and how they can help you when animating things. So like for example, if we were gonna dramatize this animation a little bit, you might have it hang in the air a little bit longer and bounce a little bit faster. Now the other thing that I'm not super pleased with is I feel like the second bounce is already like not high enough, or maybe I even want to add a few more bounces in here. So rather than like changing the values over here, you can actually just change them on the graph editor. So I can drag this value up and it's bouncing a little bit higher. Maybe I'll make this ease a little bit more. Drag these handles out. Same with this one. Maybe I'll just add a few more bounces in here just for good measure. So I'll drag this one up to, I'll kind of move these handles out so it's a little bit more rounded. Let's see how these first couple bounces like boing, boing, boing. Yeah, so, and then it just like dies right here. The other thing too that maybe hopefully you're noticing is that like, because every bounce is 10 frames long, they seem to get a little slower as we get along. So what we can do and what we probably should do is as the bounces get shorter, we should make the timing of them shorter as well. So we can actually just we can move the keyframes in here in the graph editor. And so you have to you have to finesse it a little bit. Maybe we'll just add one more bounce here. So let's see. One more bounce here, keyframe. Move this one, whoops, undo. Move this one up. Go forward a couple more keyframes, or a couple more frames, and then move this value. Whoops, what am I doing? Change the value to 1 here, and add a keyframe. And add a keyframe, that one. There we go. Change this one V vector. Maybe widen this out a little bit. So I'm just kind of playing. You know me. Flatten this out. Okay, let's watch this one. Boing, 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 boing. Yeah, there's like a little bit of a thud at the bottom there. But again, we're just going for like a little bit of bounce. Now the other thing we can do to have a little bit more fun with this is we could add some squash and stretch. So like when the ball hits the ground, we could like have it flatten out a little bit. So we go with orthographic view. And let's think about this. So like when it hits the ground, oh, you know what we could do is we could have all of these, we could take all these values and like actually bring them down. Whoops, take all of these keyframes. I'm selecting all these and bring them down to 0 like this. No, that won't work. We gotta have them up just a little bit so that they go through. And then we can step through, we can use the arrow keys to change frames here. But it's a little bit too fast. All right, so here's a little trick too. So let's say I wanted to space these out a little bit. So what I'm thinking I want to do is I want to add, a little bit of scale change. I want to have the ball like squish a little bit every time it bounces. But it's moving a little bit too fast for me. So I want to spread this out just because right now it's only, 72 frames long. I just want to spread it out to 100 maybe. Same transform tools you can still use. So you can actually scale this, and I can go X. And so I can scale this in the X direction just to space these out a little bit more. And then I can just slide this first one over to here. Let's make it a little bit bigger even. Whoops, undo. SX, make it scale it out a little bit more. GX, there we go. This one goes off the end, but that's fine. Cool. And then maybe, honestly, I'll probably reduce the vector on these guys just a little bit, just so it's not quite so crazy. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. So now what I can do is, like here, I can change my Z scale and maybe my X and Y scale too, here. Right before it hits the ground, I'll go forward a frame. Let's squash it in the Z a little bit, like this, and then maybe scale it out in the X and Y, 1.2. Key all of these. And then go back a frame like this, maybe a couple frames. And then set this back to 1, 1, 1. And then key all these again. Ding, ding, ding. So here's a case where, because look at how much this is changing. It's so small compared to the other ones. This is where it might make sense to normalize. So if I hit normalize like this, you can see that it's putting these on like all the same scale pretty much. Let's see kind of how this looks. Boing. So it's kind of giving it a little swing on that first bounce. Again, it's like moving really fast, but the other cool thing you could do, if we can take up normalize, and actually this might make sense to switch to the dope sheet, or one of these things. Here in the dope sheet, I can just copy this animation of the X, Y, and Z over to like the other bounces as well. So like I can go to frame 41 here, right where I want this next kind of squash to start. And if I select X, Y, and Z, they're highlighted in green. So you want to make sure you're selecting all of these. And then selecting the keyframes. Copy, paste. You can see that now these keyframes are here as well. You do the same thing right here on frame 69. Paste there. And same thing here on frame 90. Paste. So it's a little tricky because you got to make sure that you're selecting all of the properties first, then selecting the keyframes and copying and pasting the keyframes. Bounce, bounce, bounce. So I don't know, the little, it's fast, but it just adds a little bit of extra character. And like you can spread these out too. So if I hold down shift, so grabbing these ones, these ones, these ones, these ones, you can have it like take a few extra frames to get back together. I don't know, something like that. Boing, 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 boing. Okay, so I want to talk about your next assignment, which is assignment 4. Let me pull it up on D2L. All right, so assignment 4, basic animation, movie studio graphic. The idea here, so let's look at it. Model a short animation in the style of a movie studio graphic like this. So I linked a video here. This is a compilation of like movie studio logo animations that you would see at the beginning of a movie. Some of these you'll probably recognize, like this one is Roadshow Entertainment, Fox Searchlight, So just like these, these are done in 3D. These are, not that complicated. It's like marvelous complicated, but really the animation of the 3D is not that difficult. So I want you to do just something kind of like this, like in the spirit of this. Obviously, I don't want you to do. We're not like capable of doing crazy stuff like this yet, but yeah, like what's this one? Rat Pack. Just like a simple thing, a simple logo. So that's the inspiration. Your animation must be at least 100 frames long, have at least 3 animated elements, have lights and materials. 10 points. 6 points for including those things listed above. 2 points for submitting a video file and a Blender file. And then 2 further points for an on-time submission. So I'm going to show you a couple more things now a couple more tools that you can use to help you with this, to kind of give you some ideas. So really, I say movie studio graphic just because that's what comes to mind. But what I'm really thinking of is like a logo animation with maybe some text. So maybe you have your own logo, maybe you want to make up a logo, maybe whatever. Okay, so let's go back to Blender. Oops. Sure, let me save this bouncing ball. This one can be bouncing. I'm going to just start a new file. Text. Text is easy. Delete the cube. Shift A. Add text. There it is. Text. The thing with text is tab for edit mode allows you to type right in here. So we could call this Nolan Picture, Nolan Designs, Nolan Movie Studio. Cool. Nolan Productions. Oh my gosh, it doesn't matter, Nolan. Okay. So it's a text layer here, top right. We have object data properties, which is signaled by this green letter A here. Here's where you can change the font. You have a font tab. So you could, if you just change the regular here, it'll change the whole thing. So you can have other like you can have it store other ones, but usually it just makes sense to just change the base font. So you've got your open font window here, and you can search your the fonts on your computer. Now you probably, or you may not be familiar with the names of fonts, and you want to see a preview. So you just have to hit the gear here. Nope, you have to hit this. Oh, display mode, thumbnails, this one. And now you can see a little preview. So I actually have some moderately exciting fonts on here. You know, pick something cool. Like, what's this one? Magnetab. Ooh, Nolan Productions. Looks like, you know, vintage, mid-century. So maybe I want to, maybe I want to have it centered like that, Nolan Productions. Maybe I want the size to be a little bigger. And the other thing, obviously, that you may want to do is like model this or extrude this or something like that. So once you get your if you're using font, once you get your font or your text, sorry, once you get your text into a satisfactory place, I would recommend converting it to a mesh. There are several ways to kind of go from here, but my recommendation is to convert it to a mesh. So you can just go to your object here, convert, mesh. And this will change it from a text object to a mesh object. Now it appears as if nothing changed, but now if I go tab into edit mode, you can see that it's done the work to make this, you know, geometry. Whereas if it was a text object before, and I hit tab, you know, that's editing the text. And from here, you know, you can shift A or just A, face select. You can E extrude. You can actually make it, you know, 3-dimension like this. Maybe I'll RX90 like this. Oops, I did it to the faces. Undo that. Tab to get back into object mode. RX90. And so I don't know, like you do some text, or maybe if you have a logo, like if you have an Illustrator file, you can import that as well. So you can import scalable vector graphics, SVG here. You may be able to get away with something else too, but like if you have like an Illustrator document with a logo or something, you can convert it to a SVG and bring it right in here. Do I have any on here? I don't, but maybe I'll just like have this floating in a box or something like this, or maybe I'll go like Taurus, and you know, I'll make this pretty big, major radius like this. I'll have, I don't know, like this. I'll rotate it 92 like this. And move it up. Whoops. Ah, shoot. Add a torus. There we go. Yeah, that's fine. RX90. GZ. Cool. Maybe I'll go to like my render preview here. And I'll add in a few lights like this. We shift A, add another light here. Go to my light properties, make this, you know, 1000 watts. And make this, I don't know, make the color of this a little different, like a little blue. How's this looking? I'm gonna move my camera a little bit. So like right about here. Control Alt 0 to move my camera like this. So I need 300 frames, right? So I'll change this to 300. Remember, you can also change like your scene settings, your frame range to 300 like this. And then maybe what I'll do is like I'll let me shade smooth on this. I'll add a material on here. Maybe I'll like animate a material, or maybe I'll just make this like really metallic, like this. Specular down. And maybe I'll take this one, I'll add a material on here, and this can be, I don't know, maybe I'll find like an image texture, or maybe I can make this like an emission one like this. Now that'd be hard to read if it's emission. I'll have to go back to principled BSDF. Just make this orange. And make this like roughness 0. Let's maybe even turn roughness down on the metal too, just a little bit. Yeah, okay. And maybe I'll even do like a white background, even just like a gray background. Just so there's like some shadows on there. Make this like a really white. I don't know. How's this look? And then I can animate this. So like, maybe I'll move forward. Maybe I'll go to like frame 300 here. Did I say 300 frames or did I say 100 frames? 100 frames. It doesn't need to be 300, just 100. So maybe on, you know, frame 100, I keyframe, I go I. location rotation like this, and then I go back to like frame 0, and I GY here, and also like rotate it RX like this, and then I keyframe available here, so it's like it's kind of going through the lights a little bit, but that's fine. I can adjust that later. If you want to split up your words, because like, what if I want each word to kind of have its own animation? I can go tab into edit mode. If you select everything in one word, so maybe you do X-ray select like this, and like if I want to separate Nolan like this, you can go into your mesh menu and split selection like this. Whoops. Mesh, split. Oh no, separate selection. So now I have two separate objects here. There's text object, and then there's this text 001. So this one is productions. Helps to label things. This one is Nolan. So I've got two separate objects here. So like this one, maybe I'm at frame 100. These ones I select both of these. I can do I insert keyframes, location, rotation. Go to frame 0, and maybe like the Nolan is like over here, GZ. This GZ. And I can keyframe all these. Keyframe all these. Cool. So you know, and then like you can even animate your camera too if you wanted to. Like maybe your camera like starts here, and you animate the position, the Y position of the camera. You know, on frame 0 it's, or maybe yeah, frame 0 it's here, frame 100 it's here, and actually maybe I'll change this. So then this one, it like zooms out like this. Add a keyframe. So it looks like this. Nolan Productions. I don't know. So that's me just working fast. Next week, we will talk about how you actually turn this into a video, how you render this out. So if you wish to get started on this, just like work on building what you want here in Blender, and we'll talk about rendering later on. So come up with some ideas, have some fun. So assignment 5. I want to just talk briefly about assignment 5 because is obviously coming up after assignment 4. But start thinking about this one a little bit because you're going to have more time to do it. It's worth more points. It's sort of like a midterm-y type assignment. But the goal of this one is to create something that you would want to put in your portfolio. And I want it to be a scene. So a few of you actually have tried to tackle this on your own a little bit, doing bedrooms or other rooms or things like that. But this is another one that's like a very loose. I'm letting you have a lot of freedom in what you choose to do. So I want you to think about it earlier and come up with a good idea ahead of time before you just start throwing things in there. But the goal of that one is to be something that you could put into your portfolio, something that's like complete, that has fully modeled things, materials, lighting is all on point. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to have a lot, but I want it to be complete, which is kind of a big distinction there. So if you're like, oh, I'm gonna do, you know, my bedroom or my office, and I'm gonna model every single thing. Like I'm gonna model the guitar and the printer and the Xbox controller and the laptop and all that stuff, like that's probably too much. So it can be a scene. It can have detail, but the trick, I think, is maybe like trying to strike a balance between like the amount of things in it and having good details to achieve something complete in a relatively short-ish period of time. So anyway, start thinking about what kind of a scene you might want to do for assignment 5. Anyway, but please work on assignment 4, your kind of logo animation, movie studio graphic thing, and get caught up on your other assignments if you haven't finished those yet. But otherwise, please let me know if you have questions, and we'll see you next time.